Captain James Morrison woke up at 5:30 in the morning, just like he had done every single day for the past 12 years. His small apartment in London was quiet and neat. Everything had its place. His red uniform hung perfectly on the wooden hanger. His black boots sat side by side near the door. His bearskin hat rested on the shelf like a sleeping bear. James was 28 years old and had been a Royal Guard since he was 16. He came from a small town in Yorkshire, where his father worked in a factory and his mother cleaned houses. When James told his parents he wanted to guard the Queen, they thought he was joking. But James was never one to joke about serious things. Every morning, James would eat 2 pieces of toast with butter and drink 1 cup of tea. He would read the newspaper for exactly 15 minutes. Then he would put on his uniform with great care. Each button had to shine. Each medal had to sit in the right place. His boots had to gleam like mirrors. The walk to Buckingham Palace took James 22 minutes. He knew this because he had timed it many times. He would arrive at 7:15 and take his position outside the palace gates. Tourists would take pictures of him. Children would try to make him smile. James would stand perfectly still like a statue. On this Tuesday morning in April, something was different. As James walked through the palace gates, a man in a dark suit approached him. The man carried a golden envelope in his hands. "Your name is James Morrison?" the man asked. "Yes, Sir," James replied, keeping his eyes straight ahead. "This is for you," the man said, handing him the envelope. James looked at the envelope. His name was written in beautiful golden letters. He had never received anything so fancy in his life. The paper felt thick and expensive between his fingers. "Thank you, sir," James said, but the man had already walked away. James put the envelope in his jacket pocket. He would read it later when his duty was finished. For the next 8 hours he stood guard. Tourists came and went. Tour buses stopped and started. James remained perfectly still. When his shift ended at 4 o'clock, James walked to a quiet corner of the palace gardens. He sat on a bench under an old oak tree and carefully opened the golden envelope. Inside was an invitation printed on thick white paper. The words were written in fancy script that was hard to read. James read it slowly 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. "The Metropolitan Museum of Art requests the honor of your presence at the Met Gala 2025. This year's theme is Guardians of Tradition. We would be honored to have you represent the finest traditions of service and duty." James blinked hard and read it again. The Met Gala. He had heard of this event on television. Famous movie stars and singers attended. They wore expensive clothes and walked on red carpets. Photographers took thousands of pictures. At the bottom of the invitation was a signature. Anna Wintour, it said in flowing letters. James knew this name. She was the most powerful woman in fashion. She decided who could attend the Met Gala and who could not. Inside the envelope were airplane tickets to New York City. First-class tickets. James had never flown first class before. He had only been on an airplane twice in his entire life. There was also a letter explaining that his ceremonial uniform would be perfect for the evening. The organizers wanted him to wear his red coat and bearskin hat. They wanted him to represent British tradition at their American event. James sat on the bench for a long time holding the invitation. Cars drove past on the street. People walked their dogs in the park. Life continued around him, but James felt like time had stopped. He thought about his quiet life. Every day was the same. Wake up early. Put on uniform. Stand guard. Go home. Sleep. Repeat. It was a good life, but it was predictable. This invitation was offering him something completely different. James folded the invitation carefully and put it back in the envelope. He stood up from the bench and walked home. His mind was spinning with questions and possibilities. That evening, James called his mother in Yorkshire. "Mum," he said, "I have something to tell you." "What is it, love?" she asked. "You sound strange." James told her about the invitation. At first, she was quiet. Then she started crying. "My boy," she said through her tears. "My boy is going to walk with the movie stars." James smiled. For the first time in years, he smiled while wearing his uniform. James spent the next 2 weeks preparing for his trip to New York. He had never traveled so far from home before. The furthest he had been was Scotland for his military training. Now he was going to fly across the Atlantic Ocean to attend the most famous fashion event in the world. His fellow guards could not believe the news. When James showed them the golden invitation, they passed it around like it was made of real gold. Some of them laughed and said it must be a joke. Others were jealous that James had been chosen instead of them. "Why you?" his friend Charlie asked. "You never even watch fashion shows on television." James shrugged his shoulders. "I think they want someone real," he said, "not someone pretending to be a guard." The other guards had to admit that James was the most serious among them. He never broke character during his duties. Tourists often said he looked like a perfect example of a British Royal Guard. Maybe that was why he had been selected. James went to the library to learn about the Met Gala. He read articles about previous years. He watched videos on the computers. Famous people wore wild costumes and strange outfits. Some dresses cost more money than James made in 5 years. Some outfits were so big that people needed help walking up the stairs. The more James learned, the more nervous he became. These people lived in a different world. They had stylists and assistants and photographers following them everywhere. James just had his uniform and his training. 3 days before his flight, James received a phone call from someone at Vogue magazine. The woman spoke very fast and used words James did not understand. She talked about styling and branding and media opportunities. James listened politely and said yes whenever she paused. The night before his departure, James packed his small suitcase. He folded his civilian clothes carefully. His dress uniform was already clean and pressed. The airline had special arrangements for transporting his bearskin hat. It would travel in its own protective case. James could not sleep that night. He kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if he said something stupid in front of the cameras? What if he tripped walking up the stairs? What if the other guests laughed at him? At 5 in the morning, James gave up trying to sleep. He made his usual breakfast of toast and tea. He checked his suitcase one more time. Everything was ready. The taxi arrived at 7 o'clock to take him to Heathrow Airport. The driver recognized James from the news stories that had started appearing in the newspapers. Word had leaked that a real royal guard was attending the Met Gala. "You famous now, mate," the driver said, looking at James in the mirror. "My wife is going to watch you on the telly." James nodded politely, but inside his stomach was doing flips. He had not realized that people back home would be watching him on television. At the airport, James experienced first-class service for the first time in his life. A woman in a smart uniform escorted him through a special entrance. She took him to a quiet lounge where he could wait for his flight. The chairs were soft leather, and there were free snacks and drinks. Other passengers in the lounge kept staring at James. Some took pictures with their phones when they thought he was not looking. James sat straight in his chair and tried to look calm even though his heart was beating fast. When it was time to board the airplane, James was among the first passengers to get on. His seat was bigger than his bed at home. The flight attendant brought him orange juice in a real glass. She asked if this was his first time flying to New York. "Yes," James replied. "It is my first time flying anywhere important." The woman smiled kindly. "You will love New York," she said. "It is a city that makes dreams come true." As the airplane lifted off from London, James pressed his face to the window. He watched England get smaller and smaller until it disappeared under the clouds. He was really doing this. He was flying to America to walk on the red carpet with movie stars and singers. 8 hours later, the airplane began its descent into New York City. James looked out the window and saw a forest of tall buildings reaching up toward the sky. The city looked like something from a movie. Soon, he would be walking on those streets wearing his red uniform. James woke up at 4:30 in the morning on the day of the Met Gala. His body clock was still confused from the long flight from London. Outside his hotel window, New York City was already awake. Yellow taxis moved through the streets like busy ants. People walked quickly on the sidewalks, carrying coffee cups and talking on their phones. The hotel room was bigger than James's entire apartment back home. The bed was so soft he had trouble sleeping. The bathroom had marble floors and golden taps. There were more towels than one person could ever use. James felt out of place, surrounded by such luxury. He ordered room service for breakfast. A man in white uniform brought him eggs and bacon on fine china plates. The food was good, but James missed his simple toast and tea routine. Everything in America seemed bigger and fancier than necessary. At 9 o'clock there was a knock on his door. James opened it to find 3 people standing in the hallway. 2 women and 1 man, all dressed in black clothes. They carried large bags and cases of equipment. "Good morning, Captain Morrison," said the first woman. "We are your styling team from Vogue magazine." James stepped aside to let them enter. The team spread their equipment across his room. They had brushes and sprays and small bottles of liquid. They plugged in lights and mirrors. James's quiet hotel room suddenly looked like a beauty salon. The team leader was named Sarah. She had short blonde hair and spoke very fast. She explained that they were there to make sure James looked perfect for the cameras. His uniform was already perfect, but they needed to make small adjustments for photography. Sarah examined James's red coat with great care. She used a small brush to remove invisible pieces of dust. She polished each button until it shone like a tiny mirror. She adjusted the placement of his medals so they would catch the light correctly. The bearskin hat required special attention. Sarah explained that the hat looked different under bright camera lights. She used a special spray to make the fur look fuller and richer. She showed James how to position the hat so his face would be visible to photographers. "We want people to see your eyes," Sarah said. "Your eyes tell the story of tradition and duty." James nodded, but he felt strange having so many people fuss over his appearance. In London, he prepared his uniform alone in his small apartment. Now 3 professionals were treating him like a movie star getting ready for a premiere. The makeup artist applied a light powder to James's face. She explained that the bright lights and cameras would make his skin look shiny without it. James had never worn makeup before. It felt strange on his skin, but he trusted the experts. While the team worked, James received phone calls from reporters in England. They wanted to know how he felt about representing Britain at such an important American event. James gave short, polite answers. He said he was honored to serve his country in any way possible. His commanding officer called from London to wish him luck. The whole Royal Guard regiment would be watching the television coverage. James felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He was not just representing himself, but his entire unit and his country. At noon, the styling team packed up their equipment. They had spent 3 hours making tiny adjustments to James's appearance. He looked in the mirror and saw the same uniform he wore every day, but somehow it looked more impressive. Sarah handed James a small card with instructions. It explained where to stand on the red carpet and how long to pause for photographs. It told him which reporters might ask for interviews and what kinds of questions to expect. "The event starts at 6 o'clock, Sarah said. "A car will pick you up at 5:15. Remember to stand straight and let the uniform speak for itself." After the team left, James sat alone in his room. He had 5 hours before the biggest night of his life. He tried to eat lunch, but his stomach was too nervous. He tried to rest, but his mind kept racing with thoughts about what would happen. James put on his full uniform and stood in front of the mirror. He practiced his posture and his serious expression. He reminded himself that he had done this thousands of times before. The only difference was that tonight millions of people would be watching. At exactly 5:15, a black car arrived outside James's hotel. The driver wore a dark suit and white gloves. He opened the door for James like he was a member of the royal family. James had never been treated with such respect by a stranger. The drive through Manhattan took 20 minutes. James watched the city pass by his window. People on the streets stopped and pointed at the official-looking car. Some took pictures with their phones. James wondered if they could see him through the dark windows. As they got closer to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the streets became more crowded. Police officers directed traffic around barriers. Reporters set up cameras on every corner. Fans waited behind metal fences hoping to see their favorite celebrities. The car turned a corner and James saw the museum for the first time. It looked like a palace from a fairy tale. Bright lights lit up the entire building. The famous stairs were covered with a red carpet that seemed to glow under the spotlights. Hundreds of photographers lined both sides of the red carpet. They held cameras with long lenses that looked like weapons. Behind them, television crews from around the world waited to broadcast the event live. James had never seen so many people in one place. "Your moment has arrived, sir," the driver said as he stopped the car. James took a deep breath and checked his uniform one last time. Every button was perfect. His bearskin hat sat straight on his head. His white gloves were clean and spotless. He looked like he was ready to guard the Queen herself. The car door opened, and James stepped onto the red carpet. The sound hit him like a wave crashing on the shore. Photographers shouted his name from every direction. Camera flashes created lightning storms of light. The noise was louder than anything James had ever experienced. "James Morrison," they called. Captain Morrison looked this way. "Over here, Captain." James was amazed that they knew his name. News of his attendance had spread through social media earlier that day. The internet was buzzing with excitement about the real royal guard coming to the Met Gala. James began walking up the red carpet with slow, measured steps. He kept his back straight and his eyes forward, just like he did during ceremonial duties at Buckingham Palace. The photographers went wild taking pictures of his perfect military posture. Unlike other celebrities who posed and smiled for the cameras, James simply stood at attention. He let his uniform tell the story. The bright red coat looked magnificent under the lights. His medals caught the flashes and sparkled like jewels. A reporter from Entertainment Tonight approached him with a microphone. She was a beautiful woman in an expensive dress who spoke very fast. "Captain Morrison, how does it feel to be here tonight?" she asked. James looked directly into the camera and spoke in his Yorkshire accent. "It is an honor to represent the traditions and history of the Royal Guard," he said. "I serve at the pleasure of Her Majesty, and I am proud to be here." His honest, simple answer was so different from the rehearsed responses other celebrities gave. The reporter smiled and asked more questions. James answered each one with the same respectful honesty that he brought to his duties. Within minutes, clips of his interview were being shared millions of times on social media. People around the world were charmed by his humble, genuine responses. Comments poured in praising his dignity and authenticity. James continued up the red carpet, stopping occasionally when photographers asked. He maintained his serious expression throughout. This was not a game or performance for him. He was representing his country and his regiment. At the top of the stairs, James paused and looked back at the scene below. The red carpet stretched out like a river of light. Photographers continued taking pictures. The crowd behind the barriers cheered and waved. James had made it. He had walked the most famous red carpet in the world. Now it was time to go inside and meet the celebrities he had only seen on television. He straightened his shoulders and walked through the museum doors into a world of glamour and fame. Walking through the doors of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, James felt like he had entered a magical kingdom. The museum had been transformed into something from a dream. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. Golden decorations covered every wall. The floor was polished marble that reflected the lights like a mirror. Everywhere James looked, he saw famous faces. Actors from blockbuster movies chatted with pop singers. Fashion designers mingled with billionaire businessmen. Everyone wore outfits that cost more money than most people made in a year. James had watched many of these people in movies and on television. Now they were standing just a few feet away from him. He felt like he was inside the screen looking out at the world of entertainment and fame. What surprised James most was how many people approached him. He expected to stand alone in his corner watching the glamorous party from a distance. Instead, celebrities kept walking up to him wanting to meet the authentic royal guard. The first person to introduce herself was Taylor Swift. She wore a golden dress that sparkled when she moved. James recognized her immediately from her music videos that played on television. "You must be the famous royal guard everyone is talking about," she said with a warm smile. "I have to say your uniform is absolutely stunning." "Thank you, Miss Swift," James replied politely. "It has been worn by guardsmen for over 300 years. Taylor was fascinated by the history behind each part of his outfit. She asked about the meaning of his different medals and the significance of the colors. James explained everything with the same patience he showed to curious tourists at Buckingham Palace. Word spread quickly through the party that the royal guard was friendly and interesting to talk with. Soon James found himself surrounded by a small crowd of celebrities, all asking questions about his life and duties. Rihanna spent 15 minutes examining the details of his uniform. She was amazed by the quality of the craftsmanship and the attention to detail. She asked about the process of becoming a royal guard and what training was required. "You represent something real," she told James. "In a world full of pretending, you are authentically yourself." James was not sure what she meant, but he thanked her for the kind words. He was beginning to understand that these famous people were just regular humans who happened to work in entertainment. They were curious and friendly like anyone else. Leonardo DiCaprio introduced himself and asked about James's military service. They talked about duty and dedication. Leo said he admired people who devoted their lives to serving something bigger than themselves. The actor Bradley Cooper wanted to know about the daily routine of a royal guard. James explained about standing perfectly still for hours regardless of weather conditions. Bradley said it sounded harder than memorizing lines for movies. As the evening continued, James noticed something interesting. While other guests moved from group to group trying to be seen by photographers, he stayed in one place and let people come to him. His calm, steady presence seemed to attract others like a magnet. The food at the party was unlike anything James had ever seen. There were tiny sandwiches cut into perfect shapes. Waiters carried trays of colorful drinks that looked like liquid rainbows. Everything was beautiful, but James was too nervous to eat much. A famous fashion designer named Marc Jacobs spent a long time talking to James about tradition and history. He said that fashion was always looking for the next new thing, but James represented something timeless and permanent. "Your uniform has not changed in centuries," Marc said. "That is more powerful than any trend or style." James began to understand why he had been invited. In a room full of people trying to create new images and personas, he represented something unchanging and real. His simple presence was making a statement about authenticity and tradition. The evening's entertainment included performances by world-famous musicians. James watched from the side as singers he had heard on the radio performed their hit songs. The music was loud and the lights were bright, but James maintained his composed expression throughout. During a quiet moment, James stepped onto a balcony that overlooked Central Park. The city stretched out before him like a sea of lights. He thought about his small apartment in London and his quiet, predictable life. Tonight felt like a dream that would end when he woke up. But James was not dreaming. He was really here among the most famous people in the world. They had welcomed him with genuine warmth and curiosity. His authentic representation of British tradition had created connections across cultural boundaries. While James was inside the Met Gala talking with celebrities, his story was spreading around the world faster than wildfire. Photos of him standing perfectly straight on the red carpet were being shared millions of times on every social media platform. The contrast was striking and powerful. While other guests wore wild costumes and strange outfits, James stood in his traditional red uniform, looking like a perfect statue. His serious expression and military posture made him stand out like a diamond among colored glass. On Twitter, the hashtag Royal Guard Goals was trending in over 50 countries. People were posting the photos with comments about his dignity and authenticity. Users wrote things like, "Finally someone real at a fake event," and "This is what a true gentleman looks like." Facebook groups dedicated to British culture were exploding with new members. People who had never thought about royal traditions were suddenly interested in learning about the guards who protected Buckingham Palace. Tourism websites reported huge increases in searches for London vacation packages. Instagram influencers with millions of followers were reposting James's photos. They wrote long captions about the importance of staying true to yourself in a world that pressures people to change. His simple presence had become a symbol of authenticity. The memes started appearing within hours of his red carpet walk. One popular image showed James maintaining his serious expression while surrounded by celebrities in elaborate costumes. The caption read, "When you have to work overtime but stay professional." Another meme compared his unwavering posture to various situations. There was James standing straight with captions, like "When your friends are acting crazy, but you have to keep it together," and "When everyone is panicking, but you remember your training." YouTube videos analyzing his red carpet appearance were getting millions of views. Fashion experts discussed how his traditional uniform was more impactful than designer gowns costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Cultural commentators talked about what his presence meant in modern society. Back in England, the story was leading every news program. James's hometown of Yorkshire was flooded with reporters wanting to interview anyone who knew him. His old school teachers were giving interviews about the quiet, respectful boy who always stood up straight. The local pub where James sometimes had a pint after work was packed with customers and journalists. The bartender told stories about how James always said please and thank you. His neighbors described him as polite and helpful. James's mother became a celebrity herself overnight. Reporters camped outside her small house hoping for quotes about her famous son. She told them she was proud but not surprised. James had always been special, she said. The Royal Guard's official social media accounts gained hundreds of thousands of new followers in just a few hours. People from around the world were suddenly interested in British military traditions. The posts about ceremonial duties and historical facts were being shared thousands of times. Tourism boards in London were working overtime to capitalize on the sudden interest. They created special Royal Guard tours and promoted visits to Buckingham Palace. Hotel bookings from international visitors increased dramatically. Even government officials were paying attention to James's viral success. The British Embassy in New York received calls from cultural organizations wanting to arrange events featuring Royal Guards. James had accidentally become a cultural ambassador. Celebrity news websites crashed from too much traffic as people searched for more information about the mysterious British Guard. Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood were preparing special segments about his story. Fashion magazines that usually ignored military uniforms were writing articles about the power of traditional dress. Vogue published a piece titled "The Authenticity Revolution," explaining how James's presence challenged modern fashion norms. International news networks picked up the story as an example of how social media could make anyone famous instantly. CNN ran a segment about ordinary people becoming global sensations overnight. Late-night television hosts were preparing jokes about the serious British Guard, who stole the show from movie stars. Comedy shows planned sketches featuring actors pretending to be stoic Royal Guards in various situations. The Royal Guard headquarters in London was receiving thousands of phone calls and emails. Most were positive messages praising James's representation of British values. Some were job applications from people inspired by his story. As the hours passed, James's viral fame continued growing. His simple act of being authentically himself had touched something deep in people around the world. In an age of artificial personas and calculated images, his genuine nature felt like a breath of fresh air. The internet had found its new hero, and his name was Captain James Morrison. The quiet guard from Yorkshire had become one of the most talked about people on the planet without even trying. His story proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be yourself. Part 7. The Unexpected Encounter. Halfway through the evening, James was standing near the museum's grand staircase when he noticed a commotion across the room. Security guards were moving through the crowd, making space for someone important. James could see photographers positioning themselves for pictures. Then he saw a familiar face that made his heart skip a beat. Prince Harry was walking through the crowd with his wife, Meghan. The prince was wearing a classic black tuxedo, while Meghan wore an elegant navy blue gown. They moved with the natural confidence that comes from years of public appearances. James had never met any member of the royal family in person during his 12 years of service. The guards at Buckingham Palace rarely had direct contact with the royals they protected. They were trained to remain invisible and professional at all times. Prince Harry was scanning the room when his eyes landed on James. The prince immediately recognized the ceremonial uniform and the regiment insignia. His face lit up with genuine interest, and he began walking directly toward James. James felt his military training take over. He stood even straighter and prepared to follow proper protocol for meeting a member of the royal family. Other guests noticed the prince approaching the royal guard, and a crowd began to gather. "Captain Morrison," Prince Harry said, extending his hand for a handshake. "I recognize your regiment from your uniform. It is an honor to meet you." "The honor is mine, Your Royal Highness," James replied, accepting the handshake with his white-gloved hand. Prince Harry studied James's uniform with the appreciation of someone who understood military tradition. He had served in the British Army for 10 years, including 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan. He knew the dedication required for ceremonial duties. "Tell me about your service," the prince said. "How long have you been with the Royal Guard?" 12 years, Your Highness," James answered. "I joined when I was 16 and have been stationed at Buckingham Palace ever since." "That is remarkable dedication," Prince Harry replied. "People do not understand how difficult it is to stand perfectly still for hours regardless of weather conditions. Your service requires incredible discipline and commitment." The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes, with Prince Harry asking detailed questions about James's duties and experiences. The prince shared stories about his own military service and expressed genuine respect for the ceremonial units that maintained British traditions. Meghan joined the conversation and was equally interested in James's background. She asked about his family and his life in Yorkshire before joining the Royal Guard. James answered all questions with his characteristic honesty and humility. "You represent the very best of British values," Prince Harry told James. "Your presence here tonight shows the world what authentic service looks like." The conversation was overheard by several journalists who were amazed to witness such a natural, unguarded moment between royalty and a working soldier. They took notes and photos as the prince and the guard spoke like old friends. Other celebrities gathered around to listen to the conversation. They were fascinated by the obvious mutual respect between Prince Harry and James. The interaction showed a side of royal life that most people never see. Prince Harry asked James about his experience at the Met Gala. James admitted that he felt out of place among so many famous people, but was honored to represent British traditions on such an important stage. "You belong here just as much as anyone else," the prince assured him. "Perhaps more than most, because you represent something real and enduring." When it was time for Prince Harry and Meghan to move on to other guests, the prince shook James's hand again. He told James that their conversation had reminded him why he had such respect for the men and women who serve the crown. "Keep doing what you are doing, Captain Morrison," Prince Harry said. "The world needs more people like you who understand the value of duty and tradition." After the royal couple moved away, James stood quietly processing what had just happened. A Prince of England had sought him out for conversation and treated him with genuine respect and admiration. It was more than James had ever dreamed possible. Other guests approached James throughout the rest of the evening, but none of the conversations felt as meaningful as his talk with Prince Harry. The prince had understood what James represented and had valued his service in a way that touched his heart. Celebrity reporters were already calling their editors with news about the unexpected royal encounter. The story would add another layer to James's viral fame. The internet would soon be buzzing about the guard who impressed Prince Harry himself. James straightened his red coat and adjusted his bearskin hat. The evening was becoming more incredible with each passing hour. He had walked the red carpet, been welcomed by celebrities, and now had a personal conversation with royalty. But through it all, James remained the same humble, dedicated guard from Yorkshire. Fame and attention had not changed his character or his commitment to service. He continued to represent his country with the same dignity he brought to his duties at Buckingham Palace. James woke up to the sound of his hotel room phone ringing loudly. The digital clock showed 6 in the morning, but the phone kept ringing without stopping. James rubbed his eyes and answered the call, still feeling confused from the previous night. "Good morning, Captain Morrison," said a woman with an American accent. "This is Sarah from Good Morning America. We would love to have you on our show this morning to talk about your experience at the Met Gala." James sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. He looked around his luxurious hotel room and remembered everything that had happened the night before. The red carpet, the celebrities, the conversation with Prince Harry. It all felt like a dream, but the phone calls proved it was real. "I appreciate the offer," James said politely, "but I need to speak with my commanding officers before giving any interviews." The woman understood but asked James to call back as soon as possible. She explained that the whole world wanted to hear his story. As soon as James hung up the phone, it rang again. This time it was CNN wanting an exclusive interview. For the next hour, James's phone did not stop ringing. Television networks from around the world wanted to talk to him. Newspapers wanted quotes. Radio stations wanted phone interviews. Everyone wanted a piece of the viral Royal Guard sensation. James finally stopped answering the phone so he could think clearly. He ordered room service for breakfast and tried to understand what was happening to his quiet private life. The waiter who brought his food asked for a selfie and told James his daughter was a huge fan. While eating his eggs and bacon, James turned on the television. Every news channel was showing footage from the Met Gala, with his red carpet walk featured prominently. Entertainment shows were calling him the breakout star of the evening. James's hotel room door had a steady stream of visitors. Representatives from talk shows came with flower arrangements and gift baskets. Talent agents left business cards hoping to represent him. Fashion brands wanted him to endorse their products. The British Embassy in New York called to congratulate James and offer assistance with the media attention. A diplomat explained that his story was being seen as positive publicity for British culture and traditions around the world. James spent an hour on the phone with his commanding officer back in London. The conversation was formal but supportive. His superior officer said the entire Royal Guard was proud of how James had represented them at the Met Gala. "You have brought honor to the regiment," the officer said. "But remember that you are still a serving soldier with duties and responsibilities." 6 months after the Met Gala, James was promoted to sergeant and given additional responsibilities training new recruits. His experience had taught him valuable lessons about representing his country and his values under pressure. Young guards looked up to James as an example of how to conduct themselves with dignity and honor. He taught them that their role was about more than standing still and looking impressive. They were guardians of tradition and symbols of service to something greater than themselves. James never forgot the lesson he learned in New York. Being authentic and true to your values could have more impact than any costume or performance. His quiet dedication to duty had touched millions of people and reminded the world about the importance of genuine character. The shy boy from Yorkshire had become a symbol of authenticity in an artificial world. His story proved that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things simply by being the best version of themselves. James Morrison would always be remembered as the guard who stayed true to himself and inspired others to do the same. The flight back to London was completely different from James's journey to New York 3 days earlier. This time, passengers recognized him as soon as he boarded the airplane. The flight crew treated him like a celebrity, asking for photos and wanting to hear stories about the Met Gala. James was polite and friendly, but he felt tired from all the attention. He missed the quiet anonymity of his old life. Every conversation required energy and focus. He wondered how famous people managed to live with constant public interest in their personal lives. A little girl traveling with her family asked James why he wore the big fuzzy hat. He explained about the bearskin hat and the traditions of the Royal Guard. The girl listened with wide eyes and told her parents she wanted to visit Buckingham Palace to see more guards like James. During the 8-hour flight, James had time to think about everything that had happened. 3 days ago, he was an unknown soldier doing his duty in quiet obscurity. Now he was returning to England as one of the most famous people in the world. He thought about the celebrities he had met and how normal they seemed in person. He remembered Prince Harry's words about authentic service and the importance of representing something real. Most of all, he thought about how his simple presence had touched people around the world. Landing at Heathrow Airport, James was surprised to find reporters and photographers waiting for him. Someone had leaked his flight information and word had spread about his return. Airport security helped him navigate through the crowd of media and well-wishers. A group of children from a local school held signs welcoming him home. They chanted his name and waved small British flags. James stopped to shake hands with each child and sign autographs. Their excitement reminded him why his story had become so popular. The drive back to London took him past familiar sights that looked different somehow. The same buildings and streets were there, but James saw them through new eyes. He was no longer just another face in the crowd, but someone who had represented this city and this country on the world stage. At Buckingham Palace, his fellow guards greeted him with a mixture of pride and good-natured teasing. They had watched the television coverage and read the newspaper articles. Some were jealous of his fame, while others were genuinely happy for his success. "You made us all look good," Charlie told him. "People are calling us the coolest guards in the world." James's commanding officer held a brief meeting to discuss the media attention and its impact on the regiment. He explained that tourism to the palace had increased dramatically since the Met Gala. Visitors were specifically asking to see the famous guard who had walked the red carpet in New York. The officer also established new guidelines for handling media requests. James would be allowed to give limited interviews, but only with approval from his superiors. His primary duty remained protecting the palace and maintaining ceremonial traditions. Over the following weeks, James's life settled into a new normal routine. He returned to his regular duties standing guard outside Buckingham Palace, but now tourists recognized him and asked for photos. School groups visited specifically hoping to meet him. James received hundreds of letters from people around the world. Children sent drawings of him in his red uniform. Veterans wrote about feeling proud to see military service honored at such a glamorous event. Teachers shared stories about using his example to inspire their students. A documentary crew followed James for a week, filming his daily routine and interviewing people who knew him. The program would show viewers what life was really like for a royal guard beyond the ceremony and pageantry they saw from the outside. Publishers offered James book deals to write about his experience. Fashion magazines wanted him to model traditional British clothing. Advertising agencies proposed campaigns featuring him as a symbol of authenticity and tradition. James turned down most commercial opportunities, but accepted invitations to speak at schools and military events. He wanted to use his fame to promote the values of service duty and staying true to yourself regardless of circumstances. The village where James grew up erected a small monument celebrating their famous resident. The local school started a scholarship program in his name for students who wanted to pursue military careers. His story had brought positive attention to the entire community.